here today. I have a story to tell that I'm just so excited to share with all of you, and you're the first ones to hear it. But I can tell you right now, this story is also being told in other parts of the country. So, I took some notes, so bear with me. But it goes right into the message of what Pastor John was saying, that if anyone here is feeling like they're in a hopeless situation, that they are alone or that God has abandoned them, then I'm here today to tell you that God is very much alive and that He stands on His words and promises. You just never know what He's got going on. Even the message this morning that you gave orchestrated into my story. So that was absolutely perfect. So many of you here today were a part of a very difficult time in mine and Bill's life nearly 2 years ago when we lost our son Joseph in a tragic car accident. Joe was Bill's son and he was my stepson. And there's some of you here today that has also known that heartache, who has lost a child. And that grief is absolutely tremendous. And I'm not here to downplay that at all. But when you learn that that accident was your child's fault due to poor choices, and in that accident 2 other lives were lost and 2 other families' lives have been changed forever, well, that sorrow was absolutely unbearable. And that's what Bill and I have been struggling with for the past couple of years. And what does one do with that kind of a burden? What do you do with that? You know, we have a Bible that gives us many references of loss and grief and many examples. And they're hard to live by that. You read it, you take it into your heart, but to actually live it, it makes it very difficult. But Bill and I, we stayed strong in our faith. We never once questioned God's plan, never got angry with Him, and we know that He has His promises, that when He uses our suffering and our circumstances for His glory. We just didn't know how it was all going to turn out. We also know that He has a plan for each of us, that our names are written on the palm of His hand, and He also knows the number of our days before we're ever born. Some of us live longer lives, some of us shorter, but it's all in God's plan. So who are we to question God and what His plan is and what the circumstances in our life are? We may not see it or realize it at the time, but God has everything under control. When we were planning Joseph's funeral, Bill and I walked out of the meeting with Pastor John and Pastor Ken, and I told Pastor John at that time, Bill and I, at some point, want to reach out to the other families and extend our apologies and condolences. And we were told that right now it's too fresh, we need to wait. It may not happen for 6 months, it may not happen for 2 years, it may never happen. But if and when that time comes, God will open that door for us. And He did. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring this all together for you and tell you this story that happened. And it's going to seem like a lot of my details are unnecessary, but by the time you get to the end of the story, you're going to see how everything just came together and was perfectly orchestrated in God's timing. So my journey started July 9th when my mom and I and my son David took a little trip up to Blaine, Washington. We were up, thank you, that will help. We went up for a couple days up by the Canadian border, and that was going to be our little summer getaway. And it was about a 6.5-hour drive up there. And we pulled into the place in which we were going to stay for a couple days. I didn't even turn my motor off in the car. when my mom gets a phone call from my cousin's wife, Stephanie, in Tennessee. My cousin Ronnie had suffered a major stroke, and immediately my mom became very distraught and emotional because Ronnie had been her first nephew. There's only about 9 years between them, and they've had a very close relationship all their life. And so we started talking about going to Tennessee to see Ronnie, because we didn't know how he was going to turn out from this stroke. Well, we checked into airlines, and they were very expensive. For us just to get on a plane and go to Tennessee and come back, it was way, way too much money. So I said, well, let's drive. I got the summer off. I'm not teaching David. I got the time. We'll just drive. And so we came back from Washington. I had one day. I did a load of laundry, got the oil changed in my car, went to get my tires rotated, found out I needed new tires. But I had just bought new tires 2 years before, so I got a really good discount on those. So my plan was to be out of town on Thursday by 4 o'clock, and I think we rolled out about 4:30. So when we left that Thursday afternoon, my plan was to drive straight down to Tennessee. Well, in the meantime, my daughter Savannah happens to be in Kentucky. Now, she's never been on that side of the United States. She just happened to be there because her friend was moving to Ohio, and she drove back with her, and then they went to a family reunion in Kentucky. So her plan was to fly back. But when she heard that we were heading to Tennessee, she decided she wanted us to be with her and go see my cousin Ronnie as well. So they were leaving. The family was leaving to head back to Ohio on Sunday, and I left on Thursday. That just gave me like three days to get to Kentucky, and it's almost 2,500 miles. That would have been about 800 miles a day, and that was way too much. So after we started our trip, she calls me and says, well, we're heading back to Ohio. I don't want to stay in Kentucky and wait. And I thought, well, now I got to reroute. So ended up changing my course, headed up to Ohio instead, and I was doing about 600-700 miles a day, and we were driving with all the stops for gas and brakes and stuff, probably 10 to 12 hours in the car. And we're losing an hour a day as well, because we're heading back east and entering different time zones. So we finally made it to Ohio, I believe, on Sunday, and I was exhausted. We had a hotel for us in a little small town called Findlay, Ohio. My daughter was in the next town over, which was even smaller, called Cary. And we stayed the night at this hotel in Findlay, and I thought, I need to take a day off tomorrow. No driving, I'm just going to take the day off, I'm tired. Savannah decided she's going to take my son David to a water park, and they're just going to go have fun. He needed that. He'd spent many hours in the backseat of my car. So I think we took a drive to Lake Erie that day, just did a few little things. The problem was the hotel that we stayed in Findlay didn't have any vacancies for the next night, so I had to find a new hotel. And luckily we did find one that had a vacancy on the other side of the freeway, and so we checked in, and the room was just hot and stuffy, and it was pretty hot back there. So I said, well, let's air out the room a little bit. I've been sitting in the car. I really need to take a walk. So I decided, across the parking lot from this hotel, there's a little shopping strip mall. And I thought, well, I'll walk around that maybe once, twice, just just need to get some energy and stretch my legs. So as I walk to the strip mall, there's a little business up, as I'm stepping up on the curb, and I look inside. It looks like some kind of a fitness center, but one I've never seen before. There was no exercise equipment in this fitness center at all. But there was poles with elastic bands and rings, and I'm like, what in the world is that? So I'm walking, looking in, and boom, I walk right into a pole. And I'm like, oh, as embarrassing as that is to admit. So as I walked right into this pole, this woman comes walking out of this business. And she asked if I'm okay, and I said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just really curious about this exercise place. And she explains that it's CrossFit, that you do these exercises, and it's a total body resistance. Somehow it's a workout. And I said, wow, I don't think we have anything like that where I'm from. And she said, well, where are you from? And I said, Oregon. Really? I grew up in Oregon. Well, where did you grow up? And she grew up in Myrtle Creek, and then she asked where I'm from. I said, well, I'm in a little small town between Salem and Portland, you know, on the east side called Molalla. And she goes, I went to Molalla High School for 1 year. Now, I'm in Findlay, Ohio, 2,400 miles away from Molalla, and I'm not one to start talking to a random stranger. But it was that pole that brought us together. So we start getting in conversation, and she tells me her aunt still lives in Molalla, that she used to work at Weimar, recently retired, and she gave me the name, and I didn't recognize the name, but she showed me a picture, and it's like, oh, I've seen her there, yeah. And then we just start talking about the rodeos, and the Coleman Ranch, and Ross Coleman, and all the Molalla stuff. And then I ask her, well, maybe you know my daughters, they worked at Jasper's for many years, Jasper's Cafe. Do you know the Gibbings girls, Savannah and Amber? No, that wasn't familiar to her. And I said, well, what about the Ferris boys? Have you heard of any of the Ferris boys? And she said, Jonathan Ferris? I said, well, yeah, that's our middle son. And I'm just blown away. And then she goes, Joseph and Joshua? I said, yeah, those are the Ferris boys. And I'm just completely bewildered. So many miles from home, and here's somebody that knows our kids. And then she reaches out to me and she says, my nephew was in Joe's car accident. And I just started crying. I'm like, was it Dylan? Was your nephew Dylan? You see, when Joe had his car accident, he had a passenger in the front seat with him, his friend Dylan. And then the other car had 4 occupants. They were a set of parents about Bill and Mai's age. They had a young daughter, Kayla, 19, and their grandson, 2-year-old Lucas, who was in a car seat. She said, no, Dylan wasn't my nephew. Lucas is. We never got any further updates on what happened that night. Bill's son, John, had gone to the hospital to visit the family members afterwards and stayed in touch with them for a while, but we don't get all the details. Just little bits and pieces he gave once in a while. And I just started crying because I knew that that baby had been life-flighted, and I had heard that he had spinal injuries. And she said, no, don't cry. She goes, he's a perfectly active 4-year-old boy. See, at the time of the accident, he had what they called an internal decapitation, meaning that his spinal cord had been so severely damaged that they didn't know what the outcome would ever be. But just like in your story, Pastor John, there was a young paramedic who had just trained that was behind them in this accident. And they had just trained on rescuing babies from cars. And he was there, he came up on the accident right after it happened. And in their training, they were told never to remove a baby from a car seat. You remove the whole car seat, just in case there's spinal injuries. And that's what he did. So that's what helped save Lucas's life. Kayla was the third person who had died in that accident, and she sacrificed her life by throwing her body in front of little Lucas to save his. So we had Joe from our family, Dylan from another family, and Kayla from the other car who passed away. So this woman and I, we just can't believe, her name's Cecile, by the way, could not believe that we had this connection going on. And I just started apologizing to her and crying, and she said, "No, don't cry." She goes, "I want you to know that nobody has ever blamed anybody for this accident. It was an accident. All we have ever done was pray for you and your family this whole time, and we've been wanting to reach out to you to let you know that." That grace and the mercy that she showed to us that day was a message that Bill and I needed to hear for the past 2 years. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to anybody, but the day of Joe's funeral, when we were preparing to come here for the memorial service, Bill's brother comes walking in the house, our house, asking us why we had so many nails in our driveway. There were some type of construction nails. It's like, there shouldn't be any nails out there. Well, somebody had thrown nails behind my car that day, hoping probably to do damage to my tires. So I knew that there were some hurt people in the community that was kind of taking things out on us a little bit. And Cecile also told us that there was some pretty nasty things going around on social media. Thankfully, I never saw it, but they put it into it when they started seeing people write things about our family, letting them know that there were other families involved and it wasn't just theirs. But this family has shown just tremendous grace and mercy towards us, and we stood there and talked in that parking lot 2 hours. It felt like 10 minutes. And I could not wait to call Bill to let him know what happened. And she couldn't wait to call her sister, who lives in Roseburg, the mother of Lucas, to know what happened. And they've contacted me a few times since, still in awe of this meeting that God completely orchestrated, the timing of everything, putting us at the right place at the right time so I could walk in that pole and meet Cecile. And it's just amazing. It's just, you know, I knew I had to get to Ohio to get my daughter, and pushing myself, driving all those hours and even rerouting and changing hotels. Because if none of that happened, I would have missed that opportunity. But God made it all happen. He orchestrated all of it. And I know I got so much more to tell in this story, but I just couldn't wait to tell you that God just does not give up. You know, He gives us that message in His timing. And, you know, we're still hurting, but the burden's a little less now. Because now we've heard from that family, and we do have plans to meet up with the other family, with the little boy. And I don't know about the family with Kayla's parents yet. I'll get more information on that, is probably when we meet with Lucas and his mom. I don't know how all the relationship works out there, but we're going to find out. And they definitely all want to stay in touch with us. So I was in complete awe of being so far away from home and getting this message that we just desperately needed to hear. So I think that's it. I'm sure I missed out a lot of details, but it's a pretty amazing story. So, thank you.
Yeah.
So how many of you know that God is a good God?
How many of you have had a situation or an experience in your life where God worked in the little details and orchestrated something that you could never pull off, and you just got to sit back and go, wow. Have you had that? Yeah. This is a wow. God is good.